Hey guys, welcome to the Landis VBS Summit. Today we have a very special international speaker. His name is Doug Landis. For those who don't know Doug, he's a growth partner at Emergence Capital. Prior to joining Emergence Capital, he spent 12 plus years driving sales productivity and efficiency inside the roadstops technology companies such as Google, Salesforce, and Oracle. Most recently, Doug was the chief storyteller and VP of sales productivity at Box. Doug brings a wealth of experience in driving sales efficiency and excellence through the use of data and customer insights to help transform the way sales organizations scale, develop, and engage with prospects and customers. Doug, thank you very much, and welcome to the summit.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. Is it appropriate to say, is it obrigado? What is that Brazilian?
Yeah.
Obrigado.
It's the only thing you learn in Portuguese during the World Cup?
Yeah, I think that was about it. Too many cervezas.
Yeah, Doug was here in Brazil during the World Cup and Rio. So, Doug, before we start, could you tell us a little bit about your professional background, fill some gaps, and talk a little bit about your journey at Emergence?
Yeah, totally. So, and I think you kind of nailed it with the intro. I appreciate that. It's very kind. So yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I live and breathe the world of sales. I have my entire life, my whole professional career, whether I was actually carrying a bag and selling in the early days at Oracle or at startups. I grew up in the Bay Area and I grew up in Palo Alto. So it's kind of, I mean, you're kind of surrounded by it by nature. So you know, automatically you kind of realize technology is the way of the world. So I was really fortunate in that regard. But after I started my own technology company, kind of like right before the big .com boom or crash, if you will, the very first one in 2001. And afterwards, I realized, well, what is it that really fulfills me? And what I found was it's actually helping other salespeople get smarter, better, faster at what they do. And that kind of is parlayed into this notion and this world of what I call sales productivity. A lot of people call it sales enablement. It started off as like sales training 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, run by HR. But the idea really is how do we eliminate the barriers, the roadblocks that get in the way of a sales rep's ability to actually have meaningful conversations with the right people at the right time and identify and close deals faster, right? And the reality is this too. I'd actually say, even in my role now at Emergence Capital, I'm much more concentrated on the whole go-to-market strategy, because sales just doesn't operate in a silo, right? Sales sales relies on marketing to help drive awareness, to help nurture, to help create campaigns, and help uncover opportunities and create contacts. And then of course, sales also relies on customer success to ensure that our customers are wildly successful, and they're going to renew, and they're going to expand, and they're going to upsell. And so my role actually at Emergence Capital is a little unique in that I'm much more like a kind of free consulting for our companies. I'm on the investment committee, and when we do decide to make an investment in a company, I step in and help them figure out how to scale and grow. At the early stages, Series A, Series B, even Series C, the problems that everybody faces are pretty much the same. In many cases, it's just you just don't know what you don't know. And I, given the fact that I've been very fortunate in working at some of the pretty iconic SaaS companies in the early days, I've seen all the mistakes, and that's kind of what we're going to share a little bit about this morning.
Amazing. So today we're going to talk about building a modern sales operations and sales productivity organization. I'm super excited because here in Brazil we haven't talked enough about sales operations. I think I can count in my hands the companies that are treating sales ops seriously. So just go ahead and you prepare an amazing presentation for us. I have a few questions prepared, and I will throw in during the presentation.
Bring it. It's funny you say that about Brazil, because I was working with another company that's actually down in Brazil, Bellatrix. And it's interesting because it's a huge company that have like 2,200 employees and no sales operations. I was like, wait. I was like, wait, are you kidding me? How is that possible? Because to be honest, to build a world-class modern sales organization, you need a right hand. I view the sales ops leader as literally the co-founder of the sales organization. That's how early you need to hire them. And additionally, sales productivity is a function you need to hire a heck of a lot earlier than you might think. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is the case. But if you think about it, like fundamentally 15 years ago, the world of sales operations was you had a shitty CRM if you even had a CRM. In many cases, it was a green screen. You couldn't really get access to the right data to do any analysis. And so what you did is you spent all your time in Excel. I would argue that a lot of people, probably even in Brazil, still spend a lot of time in Excel, because even Salesforce spends time in Excel to do forecasting and kind of analysis of the deals, right? Not super efficient. I would also argue the world of sales productivity was much like this, right? It was an HR organization where you had, the old, what do they call them? With the old overhead projectors, right? Where you sat in a room and you're talked at as far as like, here's how you sell. And it was like selling DeVito was your training class. Clearly it's safe to say that things are a lot different. Today, I view the world of sales operations and sales productivity in a much different light. I view them, to use an American football analogy, I apologize, and it's such a cliche. But the reality is I kind of view sales operations, sales productivity as the offensive line. So like Tom Brady and the New England Patriots couldn't be who they are if they didn't have an amazing offensive line, that incredible support team that actually allows Tom Brady to make the decisions that he makes. There's no way he could play beyond 34 years old if he didn't have an incredible left tackle that had his back, right? So that's kind of how I see the world of sales operations and sales productivity. Interestingly enough, did you know the 2 left tackles for New England Patriots make more money than Tom Brady does?
No,
that's how much he values them. Right? It's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's like your left fullback getting paid an enormous amount of money. It's like, if you had, anyway, we can get into football analogies all day long. But so let's talk a little bit about what a modern sales operations and sales productivity looks like. So over the course of this conversation, what I want to do is kind of break it down into 3 buckets. Meaning, what should you be thinking about from a sales ops and a sales productivity perspective when you only have kind of less than 10 reps? Right? And then what does it look like when you're 10 to 100 reps? And then what does it look like when you're 100 plus reps? And hopefully at the end of this, we'll just have a better sense of the world of ops and productivity and a better sense of the things that you probably might want to care about in the early days, the mid-tier and the later tier. Because, you're right. It's really important that even if you don't have it now, where do you start? And I think that's the important thing to consider is like, what's first, what you should be considering and what should you do first? We talked about me already, so I don't need to go into this, but I've been really fortunate at the companies that I worked at before. Box was the most previous company that I was at. But I would say this, look, the anchor of a great sales ops and great sales productivity program is metrics, data, right? We have access to the data to analyze and then to make the call as to where we need to turn the dials. And there are 2 things that I think it's really important to consider when it comes to metrics. And there's 2 metrics that I'm gonna highlight that you have to start paying attention to today. And you've got to start digging into the data. It's not super easy. By the way, just know this, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. Meaning, doesn't mean you have to actually track absolutely everything. What you need to know is what specifically you should track and what you should measure. And I'm going to give you that answer right here in about 2 seconds. Right?
This is something that we're trying to evangelize our market about how to do a sales-driven approach to sales. It's something.
Yeah. It's funny because
it's hard to implement.
I'd say there's 2 things to it, right? One, everyone's like, oh, measure everything, or when everyone kind of like knows, like, oh yeah, I need to measure average deal size and I need to measure sales cycle. But it's like, well, how do you actually do that? Because I'll tell you what, if you're using Salesforce as a CRM, it's really difficult to extrapolate all of this data out of it, because you honestly have to dump it into Excel and then upload it into another tool like a Tableau or a Domo or a ClickDeck in order to really see the data in 3 dimensions, right? And so just be mindful of that when it comes to like digging into these metrics. 1, it's important to know which ones you should be pulling, and 2, how do you pull them all together so you can get some real insight and start to make some strategic decisions. It will also help your reps understand how they can get better, because that's what they want to do. Like, I need to know, how am I going to hit my number, right? And so just even looking at the data can give them some really helpful insights. All right, there's 2 numbers I want you guys to all pay attention to. 1 is what I call attainment. Attainment is the percentage of reps that are actually on track to hit their quota. In the United States, technology companies on average hit about a 60% attainment ratio. What that means is about they anticipate and build their financial model and hire against about 60% of their reps actually hitting 100% of their quota. That means 40% of the reps are not. It means they're not getting, they're not cashing out. They're not hitting their OTE. So it's important to understand that. Now, mind you, if you had 100% of your reps hitting 100% of their quota, it would cost you as a business a fortune. You don't want to do that, right? We need a bell curve. We need some people over here on the bottom, some people here crushing it, and everybody here in the middle, somewhere between, we'll call it 80 and 110%, right? So it's an important number to track. And also know that, like, I might have hit my number last quarter, I might have crushed it, but this quarter I might have a slow quarter because I closed everything last quarter, right? So there's also going to be some fluctuation. You just need to track it consistently by your sales segment so you know how are we performing. Because if you're low, if you're below that 60% across the board, well, guess what? You're not generating enough revenue for the business, and now you're going to have some real cash issues as you move further along.
So the benchmark in U.S. and technology companies is 60%.
Yeah, I say 60%. Now, it used to be like 65%. It's dropped all the way down now to like 55%. So I kind of take a happy medium, which is about around 60%. Some companies build their model around 65, some on 55. Again, it kind of depends on the complexity of your product, the price of your product, your sales cycle. There are a lot of other variables that will help you determine what number you should target, but industry standards around 60%. The other number you need to track is what's called rep productivity, right? Pretty straightforward. It's dollars per rep. How much money am I generating by rep, by month, by quarter, by year, right? And that's one that we want to track a little bit more closely, because my goal for, let's say for you is, let's say you have a $1 million quota last year and you did 800,000. Like, okay, that's not bad. It's not great. It's not bad. But my expectation can't be that I'm going to get you to $1.2 million next year, because that's a huge jump. There's so many variables that actually have to come into play in order for you to do that. And so the question is what should my target increase for you be? It really technically should be somewhere around 10%, because that's really hard to get a 10% increase from everyone, not just you, but from everyone, right? So I can take you from 800,000 to 880,000. And that's a good clip. Now we're getting closer. But just think, if we can get everybody up 10%, the amount of revenue that we're going to drive in the business is pretty phenomenal. Now, the question that you have to ask yourself is, well, okay, how do I know what dials to turn per rep, per segment, in order to get them to all increase their productivity? And I'm going to show you that equation right now. The key component to all of this is what, before I get into the key equation, I'll talk about some things that actually impact attainment, because it's important. If you're not hitting your attainment numbers, you need to start to unpack all of the things that could be getting in your rep's way for them to actually hit their number, right? It could be rep execution, like you just haven't hired the right reps. It could be competition. You've got new competition in the market. It could be pricing and packaging, right? You're just priced too low, and therefore your reps are never going to get to their number because they've got a huge number. It could be marketing. Like, all the marketing in the United States is done on the wings, and if I'm in Oklahoma and Kansas, I get no love, right? So my sales cycle is a lot longer. It could be territories and how you've aligned and mapped territories. And a lot of people have a tendency of taking this peanut butter approach around the world to territories, right? They pick a couple levers, and that's how they determine the value of that territory. And it's totally wrong. You need to be really thoughtful about the value of every territory. It could be comp plans, and it could also be quota. So all of these things affect a rep's ability to hit their quota. So if you're not hitting that attainment target, the first thing you got to do is like, all right, I'm going to hypothesize about what it is, and I'm going to go through and dig into each and every one of these. The other thing is, what's impacting rep productivity? Again, more things to dig into, but it could be rep performance. It could be training and development. Are they not enabled to go out and have the right conversations? Do they not have the right assets? Do they not have the right content to support them in their prospecting emails? Are they not getting the right support and coaching and love from their managers? Or is the sales process just incorrect? Right? So it's super important.
How to know what aspects are impacting
So there is no, I'm going to tell you this, there's no silver bullet. There is no silver bullet, right? So you need to really look into each and every one of these. That's why you look at attainment as one specific number, and you look at rep productivity as another specific number, right? And then you start to unpack and dig into the hypothesis of like, well, let's take a look at competition. Let's look at all the deals that we've lost by competitor quarter over quarter and do a comparison. And is that going up or down? And let's look at competition in terms of how competition is impacting our pricing and our discounting and our deal size and our sales cycles. And that's just one facet of it, right? And then it's like, so, okay, great. Then we need to ratchet up our competitive intelligence team. We need to ratchet up the way we're attacking our competitors. right? So those are just two really, really important buckets to start to dig into. Now, the backbone of all of this will help you to identify a little bit more, especially in the rep execution area, as to where your reps might be struggling, is what I call the sales equation. Sales equation will help you determine where you should focus your efforts. So it's important to understand, all the different categories to dig into, but this, in terms of data, will help you to shine a light in different areas. This is crucial. You got to do this. You got to understand this. What is, on average, for every sales segment, the number of opportunities that they need to have times their average deal size times your average win rate divided by your average sales cycle. And what's really important is you need to set those benchmarks for every sales segment that you have. Because then that way I know where am I struggling, right? My whole goal is like, how do I get to that $1 million number? Well, if I don't have enough at bats, right? If I don't have enough opportunities in my pipeline, then I'm never going to get there. If I don't have enough opportunities in my pipeline, right? Then guess what I need to do? I need to increase my deal size, and I need to win every deal I possibly can. That's the only way I'll get there. So if marketing can't help me increase the number of opportunities, and I can't really do it because I don't have the capacity, then I got to focus on my deal size and I got to focus on my win rate, right? But if I do have enough at bats, but I'm still not quite on target to get to my number, then maybe my deals are too small. Maybe I'm discounting too much. Maybe I'm closing the deals too early. Maybe I'm not getting to the right buyers, or maybe my win rates just suck, right? So that would just say that I've got an issue with closing. I can get the deals in the pipe, I can work them, but then when it comes time to closing it, I lose a lot more, right? And then sales cycle is just going to help you understand when the deals are actually coming in, right? Am I actually getting them in on time? That's much more of that sales cycle is much more an indicator of time. The top line is much more an indicator of skill, if you will. Really, really important equation.
Great framework to understand where to work, right?
Yeah. Well, and this, by the way, you can't pull all this in Salesforce. You can't just see this as a report in Salesforce. You literally have to run a report on each and every one of these, pull it out, and then dump it into like the Tableau, which then becomes a giant pain in the butt. But as a rep, this would be great to know all the benchmarks so I know how I'm performing. Like, am I doing better in terms of my deal sizes? And if so, what's my secret? How can I share that with the rest of the team in order to help them get their deal sizes up? That's a really, really critical metric.
So this suggests that we have all these metrics for each rep.
Yeah, well, by segment, right? So if you've got, let's say you've got a transactional sales team, a commercial sales team, a mid-market sales team, and an enterprise team. Each one of those segments, you need to understand what the baseline is, or those benchmarks for each one, right? So number of opportunities, and let's say for your enterprise team is they need at least 4 to 1 because their deals are a lot bigger. And so when they lose a deal or that deal gets pushed, they need others, right, in order to back it up. Where on the transactional side, it could be 1 to 1. I get an opportunity in the same month and I close it. So because of the velocity, it's a lot faster, right? So it's just important to kind of know what that is for each of your segments. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, now let's dig into the functions of sales ops and sales productivity and how they both impact attainment, productivity, and the sales equation. Let's dig into that. So what does sales ops and sales productivity look like if you don't have them today? Let's just say you've got 1 to 10 reps, you have no ops and you have no productivity. What does that look like? What should it look like? Well, first of all, you got to realize that it's going to be total chaos. Because when you're at this stage of a company, there's so many things that you're all considering. You're like, oh, I got to hire. Do we have the right product market fit? Are we priced appropriately? How about our competition? And then, of course, some of the executives are thinking about fundraising. They're thinking about building out the leadership team. They're thinking about messaging and positioning. It's absolute chaos at this stage, which, as we know, crazy doesn't even begin to cover it because it's just like literally every man's it's like survival mode. But there are things you can do to make your life a lot easier.
Yeah, I think this is the situation of most of our audience.
Cool.
And everybody in this crazy chaos.
Well, these are the companies that I work with every single day, so I feel your pain. The first thing I would say is, and what typically I see is like you'll hire one sales ops person, that's this little hipster that works out of a coffee shop, right? And they're your Salesforce admin. And that's fine, but you know what? You're going to need something a little bit more than that because you're going to need to start thinking about territories and comp plans and quotas and deal desk, as you start to sell more complex deals, and you have multiple additions to deals, things are going to start to evolve really quickly. You need sales ops in there to help you to extrapolate that data so you can run some hypothesis and do some A/B testing so you know what works and what doesn't work, right? Now, as a sales leader, if you can do all that, then great. Hire that sales ops person to do your Salesforce admin. But at a minimum, you have to hire a Salesforce admin because you got to get your CRM right out of the gate.
So since day one, should we have a person dedicated to it?
Typically, maybe not day one. Maybe, I mean, if you only have 2 reps, you're still kind of just validating whether or not there's product market fit. But once you know you have product market fit and you're probably close to $1 million in revenue, then in that case, you're probably anywhere from 3 to 5 reps. At that point, you're also thinking about maybe I need to hire a VP of sales. And then at that point, you need to start thinking about hiring a sales ops person, a sales ops administrator, a Salesforce administrator, and then a sales ops person. Once you get beyond 10 reps, you have to have a sales ops person, a leader, a right hand. Maybe you don't need a VP of sales ops. Maybe you need a director of sales ops, somebody that can grow into a VP title. But you definitely have to have that leader that's thinking about all of the nuances about getting deals done, right? Because the way I think about it is they're like behind the curtain.
Yeah, in the beginning is the phase that you most need to learn, right?
Yeah.
So when I see companies just start to thinking about sales ops really later when they have
and it's way too late.
Yeah.
It's not too late. It's just you've already instituted a lot of really bad behaviors, a lot of really bad process, a lot of really bad data, right? And so now you got to unpack it, and that's a giant headache, and it's going to suck for everyone, no matter what. And by the way, don't hire a sales ops person that can actually do custom coding in Salesforce, because the more custom coding that you do in the early days, the more you actually have to unpack it, because you forget that, because you're not building for the future, you're building for right now. So be really careful about that. Okay, like I said, you need a Salesforce admin to do reporting and forecasting for sales ops. And it's also important from a productivity perspective that you're thinking about, well, if let's say I have 3 AEs and I hire a VP of sales, and the VP of sales needs to triple the team next year. Well, how am I going to onboard 6 new people? What does that look like? What does that lightweight onboarding look like? What is our messaging and positioning? What's actually working? Have we identified our ideal customer profile? And do we know who's actually got a willingness to buy? And do we understand all the buyer personas associated with those ideal customer profiles? And then, of course, then we align our messaging and positioning to them. So typically what happens is your messaging and positioning comes from the founders who created something to go out and raise money and capital. That's not really what you use to go out and sell to customers. And then lastly, the thing you need to be considering is, how do I capture best practices? So what you're doing in the early days is you're learning and you're testing a lot of different things that may or may not resonate with your customers or prospects. You need to capture that. You need to share that with everybody. Like, hey, guess what? This title is super effusive about what we do. So let's make sure we do some marketing efforts, we do some campaigns, and oh, by the way, call every single one. Like, let's run a report and go get them all, right?
We had a great talk with Sean Shepard about messaging and positioning to these event we recorded 2 days ago. It was amazing. He talked about I know because you are a GrowthX mentor too, right?
Yes.
And we talked a lot about messaging and position and the MXP program that you guys have there.
Yeah, totally. And I actually have a little framework around messaging and positioning I'll share with you guys, because it's one of the first things that I do with our companies that we invest in is like, all right, show me your pitch. Great. And 90% of the decks out there are all self-centered and all about me. And it's not about the customer and what we know and understand about them. There's no insight sharing. It's nothing. It's so obnoxious. It's so arrogant. But I digress. Anyway, this is the early days. So early days onboarding, what can it look like? Well, you think it's going to look like this. The reality is it looks a little bit more like this. We've got one guy in a room and everybody's throwing shit at them, like information. You got to know this. You got to understand this about security. And here's how, right? And here's how you demo. And the person's just like, what do I do? That's the reality. But what it could look like is just a lightweight 1 week, 5-day program where you're breaking it out and going, you know what, we're going to talk about messaging. We're going to talk about products. We're going to talk about competition, do some role plays, and then we're going to get into kind of your day-to-day activities and what you should be doing. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. That's 4 days. Maybe your first day is I'm getting you your laptop and introducing you to everybody in the company. That's super lightweight, right? Super easy. Anybody can do that. From a messaging and positioning standpoint, I talked a little bit about this. Forget about this. It's a funny joke if you've never seen this movie. It's called Tommy Boy. He's a terrible salesperson, but he becomes a great person because he's very sincere. But the reality is what typically happens from a messaging and positioning standpoint, we're just talking about this, is these decks, and this is a real deck from Salesforce, is it's all about them, right? Like if you look at it, Salesforce's first slide is like, hey, I'm going to talk to you about the App Cloud. And then, hey, here's our platform. It's super technical. And then, hey, look at all of our customers. 3 slides. There's nothing about the customer or the prospect in any of that, right? And so I believe that's fundamentally flaw.
Yeah.
It's incredibly arrogant. And just like Kanye. And the reality is what it needs to be is it needs to be turned upside down. And what that means is we shouldn't be talking about ourselves until we at least get to slide 7 or 8. In some cases, even slide 10. And I'll show you what that looks like and how you do that. So the first thing is you have to recognize the opening slide. That's the incredible real estate. That very first slide, put something up there that actually provokes everyone to get thinking. Salesforce App Cloud doesn't say squat. But you know what it said underneath Salesforce App Cloud? A platform for building applications faster than ever before, or something like that. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see Salesforce App Cloud. I know you're Salesforce, right? So say something, use that real estate to provoke your everybody that's in your meeting. Get them thinking. Slide 2.
Do you think it's too soon to throw a number or statistics or just?
No, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, it needs to be somewhat relevant, but like as an example, one of our companies, is they provide a platform that allows their customers to get knowledge wherever they work, right? And so it's great for customer support use cases. It's great for salespeople, and when you're on a sales call, knowledge pops up wherever you have, whatever screen you happen to be on. And so I was like, I created a tagline on their very first slide and was like, the highest NPS score you could ever imagine, right? So imagine you're walking into a presentation and that's the first thing that you read. It's like, well, that's interesting. I want to know how to do that.
That's something that I want, for sure.
Right? So it's like, use that opening slide to get people thinking about, okay, here's what we think we could potentially do. Why not? The greatest thing since sliced bread. Then we're like, wait, I don't get it. What to help me understand that, right? But then you got to back it up. So slide 2 is all about credibility. Now, one of the things that I've recognized is like, look, unless you're the CEO and founder of the company, you have zero credibility. None. You could be the CMO. It doesn't matter. CEO, credibility. Everybody else, none. Unless, of course, you're an industry expert. And so what do you do in order to build credibility? Well, you have to demonstrate that we've learned from our customers over the course of time that we've been in business. And what you need to do is help them understand what we've actually learned and who we've learned it from. So typically people put up these logo slides and like, look at all of our customers. Like that's a bragging slide. That doesn't mean shit to me if I'm a buyer. How you can turn that slide around is you can say, look, we've learned a lot from companies in every industry at every size and every geography. And what they shared with us and what they continue to share with us is these problems. How do those sound to you? Do those resonate with you? Because it's like, look, they're telling us this. I'm not saying this myself, it's them. So I'm no longer in the middle of this, I'm just a messenger. And it also gives me credibility because I'm sharing what other people like you have shared, right? So I'm taking myself out of the equation. And then the slide 3.
Prospects love to hear about what their competitors are doing.
Absolutely. Right? Well, it's just like, look, they said that they really struggle with knowledge stored everywhere where they don't even know where it exists and not knowing whether or not it's up to date or even relevant, not knowing like who the expert is to reach out to if I have any questions, right? So I start to list problems, and this is slide 3. I start to identify these problems that these customers of ours have shared with us. And then I try and get validation. Well, how do those sound? Are any of those, because the goal here is to identify problems that they hadn't even considered. And the moment I do that, the moment I identify 1 or 2 problems that they hadn't even considered, is the moment I now have credibility, and it's the moment now that they can trust me. And I'm now in the position of challenging our customer to think differently. I'm sharing insights with them, and I now have incredible value. Even if I don't win the business, they're going to see me as like, wow, this guy knows he knows my business and he understands what's going on, right? And one example, by the way, I'll give you is, and this is common in the SaaS world, is think about it this way. SaaS applications are really, really easy to buy. They're also really, really easy to turn off, right?
Yep.
in many cases, it's a switch, not really, but it is. But the reality is this, you know what's really effing hard that no one ever talks enough about? Change management. Changing behavior is really hard. I don't care how easy your application is. I'm used to doing something this way, and you're telling me to do it this way. And that is really hard. And if you can help me do that and ensure that we're going to get the level of adoption and usage out of the product, well, then guess what? Now it's a totally different conversation. But no one ever talks about it. So if you've got an incredible customer success team that can, and professional services team that will help make your customers wildly successful, lead with that. Because it gets everybody thinking. Okay, slide 4, some statistics to help to elevate the pain of the problem. And these have to be real and relevant to whatever the problems are that you stated on slide 5 or slide 3. Slide 5 is a story. So we want a real life story of the problem at play. And I want you to use a person. Nobody can connect with Cisco as a company. No one can. I can't even connect with Facebook as a company. I can connect with people at Facebook. I can connect with my experiences at Facebook. But as a company, it's this ginormous company that's down the street. Like, that's all I know about them. So when you use a story, make sure you paint a picture of a person and their experience and the problems that they struggled with and how difficult it was. Then slide 6.
Could you give us like an example for how to do it?
Yeah. So here's a great example. Again, this company that I was telling you about that is a platform for delivering knowledge where you need it. I created a story about Joe. And so Joe's a typical salesperson. Joe gets, over 100 emails a day. Some of those emails are from the product team, giving them product updates, and some are from product marketing, giving them pricing and packaging intel. Some of those are from customers and prospects. Some are from his manager. Some are from his wife. So Joe gets all this information shared with them day in and day out. And the reality is there's a handful of messages of email requests that Joe doesn't know how to respond to. He just doesn't have the answer to it. And so 9 times out of 10, because he doesn't have the capacity to make his calls, do his demos, work his deals, do his one-on-ones, answer all these emails. And so where does he get the information to actually respond? Well, guess what? He can't find it in most cases. And so he just wings it, right? And how many times have you ever seen a salesperson wing it on a sales call? How many times have you ever seen them kind of make shit up in an email because they just couldn't find the information to share it? Well, guess what? It happens all the time. And what's the result of that? Result is the customer doesn't get what they need, right? And so that's an example of that's a real life story of Joe, a salesperson, and a scenario and what he really struggles with. And that kind of exacerbates the problem of winging it, really, in that case. When you don't have the right knowledge when you need it, you wing it, right? So anyway, slide 6 is a new way, which is basically getting everybody to think, well, maybe there's a different way that Joe could actually get that information that he needs. And then slide 7, I introduce the solution. So totally upside down, completely upside down. It is all about the customer. It's about building credibility, and it's about them to understand that, look, we get you because we've heard this before. And you're likely, not completely, but you're likely similar to some of these other customers that we've actually engaged with. Cool.
Just start to talking about you and the 7th slide. First,
exactly.
Just the customer problem.
Well, and it's not even so much identifying the customer problem. We're identifying what we've learned from other companies like you. So now, if you've already shared with me all of your problems that you struggle with, then I'm going to combine those. I'm going to say, listen, what you shared with me is very similar to what I've heard over the last 3 years from all of our other companies. But what in fact is actually missing from what you shared with me are these 2 or 3 other problems that we heard from them. I'm willing to bet that you're going to struggle with those things too. If you're not now, you're likely going to struggle with those as well. So you need to be considering all of it, not just these little problems that you're trying to solve for today. And that then totally changes the nature of the conversation. Right? Okay, we got a book, because I know I'm going way over. Capturing Best Practices. There are a ton of tools out there to do that. Most people use Slack, but there are a number of tools and technology that you can use. Just you got to make sure you have a vehicle for capturing them and a way in which you can share it all with the rest of the sales organization. All right, next phase, 10 to 100 reps. This is where many of you might be kind of eking into. The reality is this: sales ops, you're likely going to have 2 or 3 people on your sales ops team, And sales productivity, you could very well have 1 or 2 people on the productivity team. And what they should be focusing on first, I'll tell you about in 1 second. From a sales ops perspective, here's what you need to be thinking about. This is why I say it's important to hire sales ops earlier than you think, because you've got comp, you've got CRM development, you've got customer segmentation, you've got reporting and analysis and territories, and and demand and marketing funnel operations, right? There's so much to focus on. From a sales productivity perspective, we're thinking more about medium weight onboarding. We're thinking about buyer personas and maybe some verticalized positioning. We're thinking about building out a sales playbook because we've honed in our sales process. And then we're thinking about, of course, continuing to capture and share best practices in a much more organized fashion, right? So what does medium weight onboarding look like? Just real quickly, it's almost like drinking through a fire hose. In fact, that's what all onboarding is like. But you're doing things more like certifications. I want to certify and verify that you can actually deliver a pitch, and you can handle objections against our competitors. You can do a demo, right? So I want to make sure, and I need to validate that you can actually do that. And then as you get bigger, maybe you're going to do some things that actually help you focus on culture and driving culture within the organization. In this case, this Aptus they do an offsite where they go out and do some nonprofit work, which is really, really, really powerful because it's important to their culture. From buyer personas, you really need to start getting deep. Like, who are they? Where do they come from? What's their psychological background? What's the day in their life look like? What challenges do they face? How do they actually make purchasing decisions? It's really about getting much deeper and understanding our buyers. And then, of course, building out a sales playbook. Now, this is pretty heavy duty. I don't recommend you actually do this until you're well mature, you're a mature organization. However, a sales playbook just basically helps to ensure that you have the right entrance and exit criteria in every deal stage. So if a deal is at stage 3, I know what it takes to get into that stage, and I know what it takes to get out of that stage. And it also helps to create consistency of language, so that when you've got a deal at stage 3 and I've got a deal at stage 3, we know that they mean the same thing. Because there's nothing worse than, as a sales leader, and you've got a deal at stage 3 and you close all your stage 3 deals without even going to 4, 5, and 6, right? Because basically in your mind, if it's in stage 3, it's ready to close. Where everybody else, stage 3 is like, oh, no, I'm just in like a demo mode, right? And so it's important to
think we should start to creating the playbook earlier, or?
Well, so yeah, I'm going to give you a framework actually right here to help you start to think about creating this playbook, right? So first and foremost, for every deal stage that you have, just make sure you're really clear about what is the goal of this stage and what is our strategy to get in and out of the stage, right? At a minimum, that's where you start. Then, of course, you want to get deeper in like, what sales skills do I need to focus on in stage 3? If stage 3 is all about confirming, the decision makers and validating, the value, well, what skills should I be focusing on? What skills do I need to hone in on in order to get through that stage? And then as you get really deep, then you want to start to identify what tactics specifically do I need to take. For example, if you're an enterprise sales rep, I can tell you this, if you don't get legal involved in your deal 90 days out, you won't get a deal done, because legal just takes a long effing time to actually get a deal through the red line. And so it's important to identify all those tactics. And then the last thing to this playbook is, what tools do I have at my fingertips that I can actually leverage? So simple playbook framework to go out and build your playbook. But it is about entrance and exit criteria for every deal stage, understanding what the goal is, and creating a consistency of language. Okay, last section. There's just a few things to cover here. Sales ops, you now have a team of hipsters. Sales productivity, you actually now have a team of people who are really thinking about, how do we execute on the programs we know we need to do, whether it's a 90-day onboarding program, whether it's we need to up-level our skills from a sales process perspective, whether it's we need to bring in prospecting training leader like John Barrows to do some training sessions, or we need to bring Mark Roberge in to help educate our frontline sales leaders, whatever it may be. Sales productivity, they're the execution arm to everything that the sales team needs. And in fact, they're also the communication vehicle to the rest of the company. Sales ops at this stage, you got a machine. You got a lot of people on your team, because you're thinking about quote to cash, you're thinking about sales strategy, you're thinking about performance analytics, you're thinking about pricing and packaging, maybe that's under marketing. But just know that there's a lot more involved in sales operations at this stage. From a productivity standpoint, you got a 90-day onboarding program, right? That's like, so it's not just a 1-week boot camp. It's like, what am I doing to train you all about how to do your job while you're on the job? You've got an operationalized sales process. So you take that sales playbook and you operationalize it in your CRM. So there's consistency of language and process. You've got a whole communication strategy, which is how the hell do I ensure that the reps are not getting inundated with those 100 emails, but they're only getting 10, right? And half of those are from his wife. You also make sure that you have the right sales stack in place and that there's consistent workflow and a consistent passing of data. And then you're also at this stage getting very specific in terms of role-based training. So what the lead development team needs is very different than what the strategic AEs need. Okay, so how does productivity work best with marketing? I think this is really, really important to share. It's very simple. Marketing has a tendency of thinking that they should own and run sales productivity, and the reality is they should help to influence and drive it, but it should be owned specifically by a team that rolls up to the sales leader. But at the end of the day, it's about communication, content, and consistency. We need marketing to communicate with the sales team about when new releases are coming out, when new product information is coming out, customer wins, whatever it is that they know and understand. They got to share that with sales. Far too often they don't. We need content. We need great customer stories. We need great assets to share. They also need to be very targeted, not the one to the masses. And then we just need some consistency of meeting and communication. And
vice versa too, right? And sales, a lot of times sales talk with the customers, starts from hearing one question and again, and it's great input for marketing to creating content.
Totally, 100%. The more that this is all, the communication, content, and consistency is happening between marketing and sales productivity, you get alignment, right? So exactly what you're saying. Like our reps are out in the field and they're getting hammered by this one competitor. Well, hey, product marketing, we need some more competitive intel. How do I actually handle these competitors? Get me some details, or give me some customer stories that can help me to overcome that. Okay, that, my friends, is how to think about the world of sales ops and sales productivity. I know it's got a lot of information, noodle on it, and certainly shoot me an email or tweet if you have any questions.
Doug, it's amazing. There's a lot of, really, as I said, there's not a lot of people talking about sales productivity here in Brazil and sales ops. So it's really great to see how the best companies in the world are looking at it and doing it. So for a company, last question, for a company who doesn't have anything sales ops and productivity function and wants to start today, what do you think is the first step?
Well, I'd say the first step is on the sales ops side is get yourself a CRM administrator, right? Make sure that the data is clean, because without clean data, all those metrics that you want to track and measure become really difficult. So get that, because also they're going to be the one that's going to help you to architect territories and institute, maybe institute things like, I need to make a request to get our executives on a customer call. Well, guess what? Instead of lobbing an email to your CEO, it should all be baked into your CRM, right? So CRM expertise is really, really important early on. From a sales productivity perspective, you need to hire somebody to help you do onboarding. That's the first thing that you do, because everybody has to hire, and it's not even just if you're growing, you're gonna have some attrition and people are gonna leave. So what does that onboarding process look like? Beyond those first two hires, I'd say sales ops then starts to get into hire somebody to help you do some reporting and analytics, do quotas and comp plans. On the productivity side, you're going to hire somebody to help do kind of sales process, really think through sales process, kind of your sales strategy, your sales execution, and your communication strategy, right? So those are, in the early days, those are the two things to focus on, and that's it.
Amazing. Doug, thank you very much again. It was a pleasure to have you in the summit.
Of course.
And I hope to see you soon in Brazil again.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.